Welcome to Jags Drive Time, live from the 2023 NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. Now, to get things started, here's your host, J.P. Shadley.
Downtown Indianapolis, that's Monument Circle, just a few blocks away from Lucas Oil Stadium, and across the street from there, the Indiana Convention Center. And welcome inside. It's Jags Drive Time. J.P. Shadrick, John Oehser is coming up. We've got a busy show ahead. We'll review Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke. They both spoke with the media at the podium here in Indy yesterday. Some highlights of their comments coming up. Cynthia Frelund of NFL Network at 11:30 today. We opened today's show with one of the greats in the business with NFL media since 2013. That followed nearly 15 years with the New York Times covering the NFL. Also time with Newsday and the Miami Herald. It's NFL media senior national columnist Judy Battista. Oh, and John Oehser's here too. Hi, John.
But I will defer to my friend Judy, who is indeed one of the greats in the business.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time, Judy. Good to see you.
Good
always.
to see you guys.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Here we are. Another combine. It continues to grow. The configuration changes every year, but gosh, I think over 1,000 credentialed media here. It's what it is, a big flagpole event of the offseason.
Yes, I think this. Well, you know, the draft is like second only to the Super Bowl, which is unbelievable. And this is the start of the lead up to the draft. The way this event has grown, just in the time we've covered the NFL, is astonishing.
Now, your first combine was which year?
I don't remember which year it was. I was here the year that Peyton Manning was coming out, and literally they were walking around the hotel lobby saying, does anybody need to talk to Peyton Manning? Like, that's how informal it was. There were no podiums. There was none of this formalized setting. Like, you hung out with a handful of other reporters in a lobby, and the agents and their people would sort of walk the players around. Like, need to talk to Peyton?
And it was almost discouraged at one point for reporters and media to be here. That's how different it was.
Yes.
There was a period of not wanting people to come, and there's people I know. Peter King, I think, was here when there were 5 or 6 reporters.
Yeah.
And then it went from being, okay, well, you can come if you want, and now it is a
want
media event more than it even is a player evaluation event, in my opinion. It's
really a programming event as much as anything, right? I mean, all of these workouts are going to be on TV and online, and it's
And remember the
amazing
kicking and screaming with football people about how it would ruin the combine.
Yes.
And now players almost have to participate.
Well,
because
players are trained for this, right? They're trained for their time on the podium with the media. I mean, they are trained to present themselves at this. It's incredible.
There's always some news that pops up today. It's Jalen Carter of Georgia. I mean, 30 minutes before he's scheduled to speak, the arrest warrant comes down, and he's not even here. I guess he left last night. So there's always some kind of bit of news amongst those players that are, supposed first-round picks.
Yeah, that's a bad one. I mean, that's an understatement. I mean, that is a very bad one.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. So also, earlier this week, you've been following the competition committee conversation. The big votes come up from the owners at the annual meeting later in March. Of course, that's down the line in Arizona. John, I think you'll be there for that for Jaguars.com. But, it's a lot of quarterback-centric things, as is the case. Always. It's the NFL. Let's start with this push play on the sneak. I mean, I saw this in a Penn State game this year, Purdue, Penn State, up the road here at West Lafayette, and they lined up in the T formation, and 3 guys pushed him into the end zone. Touchdown. And we started seeing that more and more in the NFL. The Eagles especially were well known for that. There's a little bit of uneasiness with that because how do you defend it? And that's got to be part of the conversation.
Well, I think there's an uneasiness just on an aesthetic level. Like, this doesn't look this looks like a rugby play, right? Like, this doesn't really look like the NFL. And then there is an uneasiness, first of all, on the injury front. Like, this can't be good. You know the defenses are going to go to school this offseason on how to stop it. And, I mean, let's face it, the way to stop it is going to be like you put your defensive tackles in there tight and you have your linebackers push against. Yikes. So you're going to have the most important member of the franchise sandwiched between, getting pushed on both sides. I don't know that they're going to outlaw it, though, because I think there is a feeling of, stop it. As soon as a defense stops it, it will out, right? And then they will come up with other things to do. I know offensive coaches don't want to lose the play because they think you can do other stuff out of that formation. You sort of show that and then pitch it, maybe, whatever you're going to do. So I don't,
Jags did that in the playoffs.
right. I don't know if they will outlaw it, but I mean, there's certainly a lot of conversation around
Well,
that
I didn't
play.
cover this, but back in the early 1900s, Teddy Roosevelt outlawed the flying wedge, if you remember. I don't remember, but I pretend to remember. But it strikes me, there was a time 20, 25 years ago where you couldn't push the runner. And it sort of came back, and the Eagles, to their credit, has sort of taken advantage of the thing that was allowed. But I don't remember when it was outlawed. I mean, when it was brought back in. But I know when I was a kid covering games or a kid watching games, you could not push the runner from behind. So I don't think it would be very hard for them to outlaw the play. And I think they will, mainly because of the aesthetics and, as you say, Judy, the safety with eventually creating a situation where you have 11 on 11. That's why they outlawed the onside kick, or not outlawed, but changed the onside kick rule, was because of that point of contact and the danger. I think eventually this play will go in some capacity, by the way, that either limiting how many people can push or something. It just doesn't feel like they'll allow it. I don't love legislation that outlaws plays. I think you get into a gray area there, but I think they will outlaw this one in some capacity.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. They said after the first day of meetings that was like one of the primary topics of conversation. Like they spent a lot of time going back and forth on that, and they want to keep looking at it. And I think going into the March meeting is when they'll have a long conversation with the other owners, because it also just doesn't look very good, and like that's important. That matters.
In a league that scores 40 points a game, I mean, you're lining up.
I would also add this: even if they don't outlaw it, the first time a quarterback gets injured doing it will be the last time we see it called.
Well, that leads into our next conversation, and it's the possible return of the emergency quarterback rule, right? I mean, up until 2010, league required teams to designate an emergency quarterback.
Can we just be clear? You could always have 3 quarterbacks. You could have 5 quarterbacks, 6. You can do whatever you want. Use your roster the way you want. But after we saw what happened in the playoff game with the Niners, which was obviously very unfortunate, where they literally did not have a quarterback.
It was one team, though.
One team. I'm not sure that they're going to go back to that. I mean, there was a reason that they, lots of teams only want to have 2 active.
And that's the risky run.
And that's the risky one. I mean, that's the calculation. You make the decision, head coach.
Yeah,
how do you want to use your roster?
I don't think they should mandate how teams allot their roster. I think you've got to, at some point, the team's responsible for putting their players on the field.
Here's 53. You guys figure it out.
Right.
And you
figure it out.
The consequences.
If you think you're so smart and can carry 2, and you guys get hurt, then it's on you.
Which most teams do, right? Most teams have gone that way to get an extra player in there. But, I mean, after, that was sort of the cautionary tale after we saw what happened there. Maybe a change.
One more to discuss here, and it's the possibility of making roughing the passer reviewable. This, to me, harkens back to the pass interference reviewable. That lasted 1 year because it's a judgment call, and you can't regulate all that as well. What do you think, Judy?
Yeah, that's exactly how the competition committee feels too. They do not want to go down that path. That year was not pleasant for them. They sort of, I don't want to use the word bullying, but they sort of got bullied into making it reviewable. The competition committee had real concerns about making pass interference reviewable. The coaches wanted it. They sort of talked them into it at the league meeting.
That's right.
Big meeting, and they said, we can do this. And it was a mess. It was a year-long headache for them, and it disappeared right afterwards. And I think the competition committee feels like you're going down the same path. It's a judgment call. What they really want is things to be called, and this is not just roughing the passer, this is all calls. They want more consistency across all of the officiating crews, so that what one crew calls roughing the passer is the same as what this crew calls and this crew over here. That's what they really want, is just consistency.
That's really hard. And JP knows where I'm going with that. It's been a constant topic in the mailbag that I do. And the reality is everybody watching games, and I think that falls to coaches as well. I'm not sure sometimes that coaches want to grasp the mechanics of officiating the way that the competition committee does. And the reality is the competition committee and everybody in officiating wants consistency across the board, and they want the right calls made, but they also know from experience, and the people on the competition committee study this a great deal, more than the coaches do. They know from experience that any time you bring judgment calls into replay, the problem with it is it doesn't solve the issue.
Right.
that they're trying to solve, and it lengthens games.
And I think
because somebody still has to make the judgment,
right.
whether it's in the booth,
and
whether it's on the field.
You sort of have to appreciate, and I know this is an unpopular opinion, they get most calls right, and they get most calls right in real time, which is really hard. And one thing, they have made the rule book so complicated, you can't make it even more complicated. They talked a lot about that hip drop tackle, which is a hot button issue right now. Patrick Mahomes got hurt with one against the Jags. Tony Pollard. And one of the concerns with, do you make that a penalty, is Troy Vincent said, can an official see that in real time? Like, that's hard. In real time, you would have to be able to see it and throw the flag. Not in slow-mo, like we all watched it happen to Mahomes, but in the moment, can you see it? You're making it too complicated for the officials. If anything, you want to make it easier on the officials, and we're probably too far gone for that.
It's also hard to legislate football completely out of football.
Right. How do you tackle? Right.
And there is something to that. I don't know if that's an intent tackle. I suppose you could curb it a little bit by leaving room for the player to be fined if it's clear on replay somehow, if it's clear on review that
you intentionally,
that there was intent involved or it was outside of that. I guess you could try to curb it, because I think everybody's for player safety, but there is an element where these are, big, strong, fast, physical people playing a game that's hard to legislate everything because everything's reaction. So
yeah, on the topic of player safety, briefly, I mean, their number one thing is getting the head even further out of the game. That you're going to hear a lot more about that going into the March meetings. Like, what can they do to get the head even further out? And you're going to, those Guardian caps that they wore during training camp, we're going to see more of that.
More of that, yeah. That's Judy Battista, NFL Media, joining us on Jags Drive Time from the NFL Scouting Combine. Yeah, the Jags made the playoffs, Judy. They rallied. First off, they made the playoffs. That was remarkable enough. And then they get into the playoff game down 27, 4 interceptions. Things are just going awful. And they somehow rally to win the game.
Bananas. Yeah, I was watching that game at home, and I thought, man, this is a bummer. Like, how this is going to, like, ugh. And then, like, wow, I didn't almost turn it off. I wouldn't turn it off, but, like, you're sort of not paying as close attention. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay. Amazing. Listen, this team is primed to be good. I mean, obviously, what you saw from Trevor, certainly in the second half of the season, that upward trajectory I expect will continue. Now he's going to have a full off season with Doug Peterson. You've gone through a full season. You're going to go. That can only get better. I mean, obviously, Doug Peterson had a lot of work to do in that franchise last year and did a remarkable job changing things on the fly. But now year 2, you would think, is only going to be better. Like, I think the whole mindset of the Jaguars is different now, right? It's not about really building and retooling as much as maintaining, adding pieces here and there, but you're not, we're not going to see those wholesale free agency spending sprees anymore, and obviously you don't have the first pick anymore, so it's a totally different thing for the Jaguars. It's a good place to be.
You're trying to match the Chiefs and the Bills and those teams now. That's the expectation, is to get to that level and then knock those teams out.
Stay there.
It's different.
It's tough. One reason I think the Chiefs are so daunting as an opponent is they've already crossed the bridge that every team has to. You've already given your superstar quarterback the huge contract, and they have figured out a way to structure the roster and keep the pieces that you have to keep and still win a Super Bowl. I mean, the Bengals still have to get over that bridge. Obviously, the Jaguars will eventually have to get there. That's the next hurdle.
Do you think the quarterback contracts will continue to go up? I mean, you're seeing Lamar Jackson right now. Sort of, it feels like there's the Deshaun Watson ceiling that teams don't want to get past, and they're scared of, understandably. How do you see that sort of playing out? Not necessarily Lamar Jackson specific, but quarterback contracts, because it's going to be hard to get past. Mahomes has to be the ceiling because nobody's better than him. But where do you see it landing? Are teams going to sort of at this point say stop?
Not if you want to keep your quarterback.
Right.
They're not. And first of all, let's be clear. Nobody here is losing money. No teams are losing money, and the salary cap keeps going up. There's more and more money flowing into the system. The next big one, I mean, Lamar's situation, let's set that one to the side because it's unusual. The next big one is Joe Burrow is due for an extension, eligible for an extension this
right,
year.
you're right.
He could reset the market, for sure. And, I mean, he is clearly – I mean, obviously the Bengals can't let him get anywhere near free agency. The Lamar situation is fascinating, and he wants a guaranteed contract. He wants the Deshaun Watson structure, the guaranteed money. Every other team has resisted doing it, and even the big contracts that have been given to quarterbacks since the Deshaun Watson thing have not gone all the way.
Right.
So, I mean, the question is, would the Ravens do that? Because the Deshaun Watson right now is viewed as an outlier, and the other owners were not happy with the Browns for going there, especially for that particular player and the baggage he arrived with. So if another player who does not have that baggage and is not in that odd circumstance gets a fully guaranteed contract, that reshapes football.
Yeah, then it's the standard. Right.
Completely changes things. And as you said, like, if you're giving that to Lamar Jackson, respectfully, I mean, Patrick Mahomes has to say, like, hi, right? Right? Joe Burrow, hi, I'm the franchise.
Right, even Josh, right.
Right, like, what are you going to do? So I would not expect the Ravens to go on that. And owners are going to resist as long as they possibly can. Eventually, somebody else will get it.
Right.
Judy Battista, NFL Media. We could talk with you all day long, but appreciate the time that you gave us today.
Great to see you guys.
Judy, thank you.
I'll see you in Arizona.
Fantastic.
Right?
See you down the line.
Take
Judy
care.
Battista joining us, NFL Media. Back in a moment. We got big things of the day. A little later, Cynthia Frelund, NFL Media as well. We're in Indianapolis. This is Jags Drive Time. Back in Indianapolis in the Indiana Convention Center, it's Jags Drive Time on a Wednesday. JP Shadrick with John Oehser. Our thanks to Judy Battista, NFL Media. John, let's get to the big things of the week for the Jaguars. Doug Peterson, Trent Baalke speaking with the media earlier this week, Tuesday, here in Indianapolis. We'll hear from them coming up in just a moment, setting the tone for the offseason ahead. Part of that is already underway with some contract restructuring for the Jacksonville Jaguars over the last week or so, reportedly, to open some cap space, and still some signing maybe to be done of pending free agents. And now the focus turns from free agency acquisition from other teams to drafting and developing and keeping the core players together for this team while adding some pieces. And that's where we are, John. It's what happens when you have a winning team and you want to keep that winning team together. You have to change your focus. You're not going to go out and spend $100 million total in free agency.
Yeah, I've gotten some emails from people asking, well, it's pretty quiet. It's pretty boring. Welcome to winning. I mean, and this is how it's supposed to be. And you win in the NFL usually by drafting and developing well, adding a few key free agents, which they're trying to do. By doing things this way, this is how you keep the ship moving in the right direction. One thing on these restructurings, I think some people sort of think players are taking pay cuts or they're dramatically reworking their deals, and that's a little bit of a misnomer. Most of these players are still making the same amount they were. They're getting paid in a different way. It's pure salary cap machinations, and there is a strong element of pushing some of these contracts forward in the sense that in later years of these contracts, 24, 25, there will now be salary cap ramifications of those players where there weren't before. But in terms of what they're making, in terms of their commitment to the franchise, it really doesn't change. So, this is something that the Jaguars haven't done a lot in recent years because they haven't won a lot in recent years. But when you've got a core of players that you want to keep together, if you don't do this, then you won't be able to keep those players. This is part and parcel to winning in the NFL.
Let's hear from Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke from yesterday. Of course, the full availability is on Jaguars.com. But Doug Peterson, well, this team has momentum after winning last year, getting to the playoffs. But do they? That's the question. Momentum can only take you so far to the next season.
I think momentum can carry you, but every year is different. We're all 32 teams are starting over, and everybody's 0-0. And, we're trying to build the best roster, just like the 31 other teams right now. But we can learn from what we did, especially the second half of our season. I feel like we got the right guys, the right makeup, the chemistry, the locker room is solid. And those are the things you build on. That's the momentum that you're talking about with those guys right there. And guys that have been in Jacksonville, and they've kind of gone through some tough times. And now, this past year, they got on the other side of that. And so that's the challenge now of keeping that rolling as we head into 23.
That's the trick. Coaches who've been around the league for a long time understand, yes, you can talk about momentum, but that season is done. It's in the past. That group of players as a whole will never be the same again, and whatever magic or whatever that was in that room, well, you can't just push the button and do it again. You've got to build another separate team, an identity of the team in 2023 and beyond.
Well, and Joe Montana used to talk about taking notes on the first day of training camp or the first day of the offseason program, taking notes when they were introducing the offense the same way in year 12 as when he was a rookie. When I was with the Colts, Peyton Manning would clean out his entire locker after the season, and if you walked through their locker room, there was nothing in his locker short of maybe a notebook, something he left. But I never really asked him about it, but I assume it was a very symbolic thing on his part of, hey, 2008's over. When I come back in 2009, first of all, most players don't know if they're automatically back. Peyton was obviously going to be back. Terry's going to be back. But mentally, there is when you walk in, it's a fresh start. I don't know how Jaguars players are treating their lockers, but it is important when they come back to realize just because the thrill and the energy of last season, in a way, it's almost good for this team to have 3 or 4 months between that, because that will be over. I think they will benefit from that. I think they showed what kind of team they can be. There's certainly a core, and there's certainly every reason to believe that Trevor Lawrence will continue to lift this franchise. But it's not guaranteed. I think the coolest thing that Doug said yesterday to me was when he talked about wanting the team to feel the expectations and the pressure. And I think he said it a couple of lines after the SOT that we ran. That's intriguing to me because he's embracing it. He knows it's going to come. He knows they're the AFC South champions. But I think he also knows, hey, it was great to be in the divisional playoff. We want to be in the Super Bowl next year. And my sense is that will be his message to the team April 17th. Last year was very much about culture. It was about trying to improve. They said they wanted to go to the Super Bowl. I don't think that was really on the front of their minds at the beginning of the season, but I think he will find a way to have that in the front of their minds in the proper way come April 17th.
And, not
embrace the pressure, JP.
It's the NFL, so you're not really sneaking up per se on any team. It's not like a college underdog goes on the road and wins as a 50-point dog, any of that stuff. But this team was not expected nationally to do a lot of things last year. Well, that's out the window.
Right.
Because everybody saw what happened in December and the playoff game, and they realize now that the target is on the Jaguars, and they're not going to be sneaking up on a team trying to come back from behind and all that. Those days might be done. So
yeah, I'm never huge on the whole sneaking up thing,
yeah.
But I do think internally it changes maybe the pressure that a team feels on itself. Jaguars late in the season, it was an interesting season to me. They played without any pressure, and I think they sort of used that underdog thing. But then the reality is they had to deal with it in the last maybe 2 weeks of the season and the playoffs. So they weren't a team to me with nothing to lose against the Titans. They had all of a sudden become the team that led the division, and they were playing a team that had lost 6 or 7 in a row. To me, they were the team that had a lot to lose in that game. So I think they experienced what you're talking about. But then once you got to the postseason, once you got to the Titans game, I think they did feel, okay, we're supposed to win this game. Let's figure out a way to go do it. So I think probably they benefited from both of those things last year, JP. And I think they'll benefit from the second part, playing some pressure. I think they'll be a little bit used to that going into next season.
Let's hear from Trent Baalke, general manager, and as we mentioned, the focus still is on re-signing pending free agents before they go to free agency at the start of the league year. But, it's also looking ahead to the draft, drafting well for this team and developing players.
You answered the question, right? The last 2 years, we've delved heavily into free agency, and we're at the point now where it's draft and develop, right? We got a nice core of young players. Feel really good about that group with a good mix of veteran guys with a lot of experience. And the whole thing for us now is about the locker room, making sure we keep the locker room where we've got it.
It's just what we discussed a little bit earlier, but hearing it from Trent Baalke makes a lot of sense. I mean, they've got the 24th pick in the draft this year in the first round, and they've got to kind of cherry pick what they want in some key spots, and it may not be a big splash in terms of free agency. As we said, there'll be a couple, but the focus now turns to keeping this core together.
Well, I think it's important, and I think most fans watching this show get it, but it is it's going to be a pretty dramatic sea change this offseason from how the Jaguars have operated in the past. Even the years right after 2017, they didn't do very much in 18, but then they go out and they acquired Nick Foles in 19. They weren't that active in 20, but they've been active in the last few years. And so you're used to on March 16th seeing a lot of fanfare, seeing the free agency press conferences, the car wash, if you will. And that's not going to feel that way this year. And I think there are people out there who are going to say, well, they're standing pat. They're resting on their laurels. Well, the best way to improve in this league is to improve from within, build on what you're already doing. Yes, you add pieces, but this is going to be a year where they let their core develop. They try to emphasize continuity, and I don't think you'll see a lot of splash in free agency. And I, being an old school guy, I kind of like that. I think some fans will be uncomfortable with it.
Yeah. It's not normal,
right?
At least in Jaguar land, to be doing it this way. But it might be the new normal, right? That's
you
the idea of success.
Yeah, you hope it is, because if it's the new normal long term, it means you're drafting and developing well. You have to supplement through free agency. This team is built through free agency, and as I've said often, they did a remarkable job in the last 2 years, especially last year, building in free agency. I asked Doug Peterson after he talked on the podium yesterday about their ability to add what could be core players in free agency, meaning Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, guys that you want to keep. It's significant that they want to keep Evan Ingram. Many guys signed to 1 year prove-it deals, signed with other teams the next season. For him to become a part of the core, just like Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Brandon Sheriff, these guys are guys they want to keep. That doesn't always happen. And so they did a remarkable job of building a core of players who you think are going to be long-term guys, but it's very risky and it's very expensive to do that. You can't do it on the long term, and they won't try to. They can't try to.
Right. There was not a lot of news on that front in terms of the pending free agent guys yesterday, but Baalke did say he met with the Juwan Taylor camp here in Indy yesterday morning. And then the Evan Ingram situation continues. Sounds like that's trending in the right direction. Let's put it that way.
I think people generally get Evan Ingram's going to be here. And Trent Baalke didn't say it. Doug Peterson didn't say it because they're negotiating with these guys. But it's hard for me to see Evan Ingram not being here because they want to sign him to a long-term deal. Both sides want that. And then if that doesn't happen, the franchise tag is very palpable for a tight end. I think it's around $11 million. That fits what they need to do on their books. They can make that work. They'd rather get a long-term deal because the short-term cap would be smaller. But I would be stunned if Evan Ingram's not here. I hope that Juwan Taylor's here. The team hopes Juwan Taylor's here, but that's a much more difficult situation because of the position. The franchise number on that is 19 for him for 1 year.
Big.
I can't see them doing that. I think there'll be conversation. I think they'll get close. I think they'll try to find that win-win that Trent mentioned several times yesterday. But with the right tackle, with already having a left tackle under contract in Cam Robinson, having Walker Little on the team and ascending, the Juwan Taylor is much more iffy. Although I don't think there's less of a desire to get him done on the Jaguars' part. Don't read it that way. But I think the reality of the financial situation, at some point it has to work for the cap, for the long term, for what they have around him. And there's some other factors that I think make Jawan Taylor less likely, although not any less hopeful on the Jaguars' part.
Absolutely. Let's come back in a moment. We'll take a timeout. Cynthia Frelund, we're out to her. She'll join us, NFL media, here in just a little bit, analytics expert, get her thoughts on the Jags' run and quarterback trends in the league and all kind of things with Cynthia coming up in just a little bit. We're at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis on Jags Drive Time. Welcome back. It's Jags Drive Time from the Indiana Convention Center in Indianapolis. The 2023 NFL Scouting Combine is underway. The on-field testing begins Thursday. The Radio Row business continues today. Our next guest has coverage of the NFL Scouting Combine the next few days on NFL Network. She has been with NFL media for about 7 years. Analytics expert Cynthia Frelund. Great to see you, Cynthia. Here we are. It's an analytics age. Let's start off with the analytics of Radio Row today for you. I saw you about an hour and a half ago making the start of the rounds. How many stops have you made today?
I try to make as many as I can. I know I said this to you before, but I truly like meeting with every single team because, at the network, sometimes we don't talk about, we kind of talk about like bigger topics, right? But I really do study every single team like very in depth. So it's nice to be able to kind of roll out some of that knowledge sometimes and also like connect with, because like Jags fans will be like, do you even like us? I'm like, of course I like you. I can't get to Jacksonville during the season. It's too far from California. Like my job's in California, but I want to come to a game.
Well, Jags fans don't think anybody likes them, so
that's true.
Right.
That's true. I know MJD really well, and he doesn't think anyone likes him either.
Yeah, he's coming around later today. I think we'll hear about that. I'm sure. All right, let's start with that then. So you mentioned to us off the air that all these teams now have analytics departments.
Yep.
And that's really been a trend over the last 5-7 years, especially. I know the Jaguars are heavy into that. It's really just a history of what's happened in the past and using that to formulate decisions. So how do you carry that over to television format and make that interesting for people? Because you do a good job at that.
Thank you. That's very nice. I'm like, hopefully it's interesting. Look, the reality is all of these teams, the technology has enabled us to do it over the past 5, 7, 10 years a lot faster, but the principles and ideas aren't new. Right? Like, people have been doing this, maybe they called it quality control, or they had a different name for it, but everyone's been trying to improve the quality of their decision making since the beginning of football. Everyone wants an edge to win, right? So the difference is more like figuring out how to use the newer technologies, the different coding systems, the different ways of, now instead of watching 4 games of film before every game, now you can like do just tailored sequences or just when this team was in cover 4 and you can watch 30 games if you want to, whatever, things like that. So, or you get like just a better chance of like, doing exactly what you want, just faster, right? So I think I was a banker by trade and maybe I have a nasty ADD. So I think that's part of what I'm like, I need it now and fast, squirrel. Like, I think maybe I've just like put those two things into play to try to tell stories because really, I view it as every player has really great skills that could be awesome in certain scenarios. And it's it's like showcasing that and being like, this is why this matters, as opposed to being like, this guy's good, which, great. And, we already know that, right? Like, what makes Christian Kirk so good out of the slot? Does the slot matter? Why are we now not calling nickel corners? Before it was like, he's a slot corner, and he was using the pejorative. And now you need a nasty slot corner because everybody uses the slot. See Kirk, Christian. Yeah. Right. So that's the kind of stuff.
Are we, how far down the analytics road are we? And when I say that, I mean, it's remarkable to me as somebody who's covered the league about 25 years, how much more it is used in obvious situations in every game, in decisions making. It's clearly changed how coaches approach certain situations in games. There's also been natural resistance because people are always resistant to change. How much further do you see it going, the usage that fans will see over the next 5 years, if you follow me?
Well, I hope we stop hearing things on broadcast that are like, the analytics say to go for it. Like, it drives me nuts because that's actually not true.
Okay.
That's what I want to do. I want to like be the person be like, okay, if you do this in past games, it's worked 3/4 of the time. Doesn't mean it's the right decision now, because was your right tackle beat up? Was your quarterback just sacked 3 times? What's going but you can, so let's just talk about it in like, this is why they may be thinking this. Now, putting into play different like installs. So during the week, the week has changed. They're trying to optimize for things like load, which, by the way, sports performance analytics have probably the furthest place that they still could go, but they've come really far too, which is great. Keep me healthier, keep me, more able to do my job, and also like keep me good for the rest of my life. Awesome. These are all great things that have come from analytics, right? Big data. So the reality is, you're going to change your week. And so now we're practicing more fourth down situations. Okay. And so it's not just like haphazard, go for it. Like, that's not what it is.
Right.
Do you have the fourth down play when you've seen, cover 3 6 times in a row? I don't have the answer to that,
right,
but your coach does, right? So the reality is it's a way of staying organized and trying to use your assets, aka your players, to beat my assets in the best way possible. Get the biggest return on investment.
Has a coach ever blamed you for
everything? Yes.
For going for something when he really didn't want to?
I'm sure that happens. Luckily, I've never been in that situation. Right. But I will say that there was one coach who I called out for not, he's like, don't you I go for it on fourth down. I'm like, you are going for it in ridiculous situations. You just want to be known as the fourth down coach. And he's like, well, isn't that analytics? I'm like, no. Oh, okay. It's all about context, right? So if then, right? Like, you're not going to build more trucks if everybody's not buying them. Right. So make the decisions to, figure out what you have and make the right. It's decision making, right? If you can get 10% better at your, there's 70 snaps in a football, or 70 plays in a football game. That's 7 plays. How many games have come down to 7 plays? The answer is a lot.
Most.
Right. So if you can get 10% better, if you can make the quality of those 7, that's a huge improvement.
Cynthia Frelund with us, and a coach who knows that very well is Doug Peterson. I mean, the guy was he was the fourth down coach before all these other fourth down coaches.
He's not the one who yelled at me, because he actually, a guy who works on your staff now who I think is one of, if not, like, his name's Ryan Paganetti. And I have to say, I'm Italian, so Paganetti, you can't say it the other way. But anyway, so he does a really good job of explaining how the fourth down should work, because Doug was not the one who got mad at me for that. He was not. It was another one. He's out in California, and you may have beaten him in a most epic comeback.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
Anyway, so it wasn't Doug.
Okay. That narrows it down. Narrows it down a little bit. All right, so you mentioned Christian Kirk earlier.
Yep.
I mean, so Zay Jones had a big year.
Yep.
Evan Ingram had a big year.
Yep.
He's coming up. They got to figure it out in the next couple of weeks with him. Calvin Ridley could be on this team now.
I mean,
they got to figure that out. What does the Ridley addition, if he's reinstated, do for the rest of the idea of this offense in Jacksonville?
Yeah, that's a pretty scary offense. Look, I think the interesting thing that you see in Doug Peterson-led offenses, and you've seen it all the time, quarterbacks get better as the season goes on and as they play with him longer, in part because he creates so many different opportunities for all of the different pass catchers. So if you're adding a guy like Calvin Ridley, who since his days at Alabama was a pristine route runner, it's so reliable. And I say that in like the sexiest way possible, right? Like it's great to know exactly where your wide receiver is going to be at the moment that you need him to be there.
Absolutely.
That's incredible.
It's everything.
So he's got great speed, but I don't care about like the speed for a 40's sake, but I care about, are you going to, in a game, are you going to run that deep crosser at the exact second I need you there so our timing can get? So that's what is really going to be interesting, because Christian Kirk has great feel for that. Zay Jones really improved in that this season, especially as the season went on. And I would be surprised. Like, look, Evan Ingram is awesome, but I don't know if they need to spend there, because there's a lot of good tight ends coming out. And I like Evan Ingram. Like, this is no shade. This is just saying, like, it's an interesting, because supply and demand. There are a supply of good tight ends that could potentially do that role, especially if you're getting Calvin Ridley back. Anyways, not being mean, being nice.
You could tweet at her directly.
Right.
It'd be great. Yeah.
Yes.
How do you apply to make the draft interesting for fans from an analytics point of view? I know you've when you do a mock draft, you always preface it by saying, "Hey, this is not necessarily
who
I'm
not trying to guess who's. I don't care about that."
So how do you? What's the art
Yep.
of bringing analytics from your point of view, into the draft analysis part?
Yeah, so especially like the first round is it's always funny because we only mock the first round, but we really should be mocking like I care more about rounds 2 through 4 because that's like the meat and potatoes of your team, and if you can get that right, then you're great. So I think that like a lot of it is like, who is this person? Everyone wants a comp. Everyone wants like, you are the next blah. Like, but that's not really what's impactful. What's more interesting is more like, okay, on the Jags, this guy who's let's call him a 7 out of 10,
okay,
right? But if he's a Jag, then he's an 8. Wow, then we got good value there.
Okay, best fit.
Right.
Okay.
So it's more about fit, and it's more obviously positional value matters a ton, right? But it's about how the fit works, and trying to say in this team he will play the X role, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like he's a true outside, whatever receiver. That's not going to be who you draft, but you know what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
Like,
There you go. Give her a follow on Twitter at @CFrelund if you
unless
don't.
you're Evan Ingram, and then you're mad at me.
Aha,
He'll go get paid somewhere else. Right? What is it?
Come on back, Evan.
He can
Come on back. Things are trending the right direction, Cynthia. That's what's going
Until
on.
now.
I'm trying to get you. I'm trying to get you like even more good players. I'm not saying I'm just saying like you could get a lot. There's only 228.4 million or 224.8 million. Like you gotta figure out where to spend wisely. You don't always get to this rookie quarterback contract. You're gonna have to pay that one.
That's coming soon.
I know.
And you better pay it sooner than later.
Correct. Be smart to pay it. Figure it out now. You know what I mean? Like figure out how to. There's a lot of
some money in the piggy bank for the rainy day coming up, I guess. Cynthia, thanks for the time. Really
Thank you so
appreciate
much for
it.
having
We
me.
enjoy your work.
Yeah, anytime. Truly.
Fantastic.
Cynthia
Thank you.
Frelund, NFL Media. We're back with some final thoughts. Jags Drive Time from Indianapolis.
Jaguars fans, here's a great way to pay with pride wherever you go. Exclusively from TIAA Bank, the Jacksonville Jaguars Visa debit card comes with a fierce look and fantastic features, along with the convenience to make purchases online or at millions of locations worldwide. And it's yours, free, when you open a Yield Pledge checking account. Order yours today. Visit TIAABank.com/JagsCard. TIAA Bank is a division of TIAA, FSB, member FDIC, and the official bank of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Reconnect with the best version of you at Amara Med Spa, Northeast Florida's premier luxury medical spa, located in Ponte Vedra, Town Center, Avondale, St. Augustine, and Fernandina. With the most advanced injectors, estheticians, and technology, Amara Med Spa is redefining beauty, offering services such as Botox and filler, M-Sculpt Neo, painless laser hair removal, and advanced skincare treatments. Visit theamaramedspa.com and book a complimentary consultation today.
And that's a Magellan first down. Move the freight, move the freight, move the freight. Would you like to control your own income? Work at Magellan Transport. Voted the coolest office space in Duval. Bring your talents and let your career flourish. Visit their website at MagellanLogistics.com and apply online. Trust service. Trust Magellan.
Move the freight, move the freight. Magellan Transport, voted coolest office space in Jacksonville. Apply online at MagellanLogistics.com. And welcome back to Indianapolis inside the Indiana Convention Center. JP Shadrick with John Oehser. Our thanks to Cynthia Frelund, Judy Battista earlier in the show. The analytics conversation with Cynthia is always fascinating to hear her work on the air and to get to converse with her here and get inside that head a little bit. It's a different place, but it's where the league is right now. It's where it's going to stay for a long time.
Yeah, she does a great job of taking something that is very numbers-based, which can be tough to talk about, and make it interesting, frankly, and make it understandable. And I've always thought she does a great job with it, and I was glad to have her on the show.
All right, so the rest of the week here at the Combine, the prospects are rolling through. A day or so before they go on the field tomorrow. I think the defensive linemen, linebackers are out there. They were at the podium earlier today. It's the last wave, I believe, of coaches and GMs today as well. And then it's the weekend continues. The testing continues, and we'll be out of here on Friday. Yep. Our coverage will continue tomorrow. We'll have Jags Happy Hour on radio at 4 o'clock from this table right here in this convention center tomorrow and wrap up the week here in Indy.
Yeah, and a couple stories coming up on Jaguars.com. Doug Peterson talked about things yesterday that were interesting to me, and so did Trent. How they're going to use the running backs next season. I think Doug wants more out of that position. Not a knock on any specific player, but I think he wants the offense to gain more from that position, and I think he sees ways that he can get more out of that position. And I certainly have a story on his thoughts on Trevor Lawrence and how he will look as he develops going forward. So looking forward to those.
It's a lot coming up. Thanks to our entire crew here in Indy and back in Jacksonville, and certainly our guest, Judy Battista, Cynthia Frelund. Coming up tomorrow, it's Jaguars Happy Hour Radio, 4 o'clock on 1010XL AM and Jaguars.com and Jaguars social media with CBS Sports senior writer Pete Prisco. You might want to tune in for that one. For John Oehser, I'm JP Shadrick. This is Jags Drive Time from Indianapolis.